Yes? Okay, we're in business. Perfect. All right, so I will switch over to this camera as I need to. Welcome, everybody. I think this is being recorded, and I'm going to upload it onto YouTube if that works. We'll see what happens, okay? So my intention is to do these, I don't know if we're going to say weekly, but definitely I'm going to do another one very soon. I want to do Indian food for the next one. And with all of them, the intention will be to be about an hour that we cook together, a few plant-based recipes that'll make a whole meal by the end. Hopefully I'll be able to squeeze a dessert in to one of them. It didn't work for this one, but I just wanted to make sure we got the whole meal done in the hour. But yeah, so I will go through, I'll kind of give you some tips about different ingredients as we go through. We'll make each recipe in an order that's going to allow it to kind of be done within the hour. And if anyone has any questions, if it's something really pressing, please unmute yourself and get my attention. But I'm mostly probably going to talk about most things as we go along. But if it's something like, if we're like steps ahead and you still haven't figured something out, stop me so I can, that's all kind of the whole point of it being a Zoom meeting, right? So what we're going to do very first is prepare a couple of ingredients that we need for multiple recipes. And then the first thing that we're trying to do is to get the meat mixture into the oven, like the quote unquote meat mixture into the oven, right? So a couple of people reached out, and I should have put it in the email, I realized, for the mushroom haters out there, because there's a few of you. It was not just Debbie's family. It was Debbie's like, I love mushrooms. Everyone in my family hates it. And somebody else is like, everybody here hates mushrooms. Sarah was like, we all hate mushrooms. So I just want to make sure I'm not leaving anyone in the waiting room to realize. So yeah, if you hate mushrooms, you can just double the tofu. That's totally an option, okay? So we're good. The first thing we're gonna do is peel an onion. My tip for peeling, okay, wait a minute. I'm gonna move the camera over now so you can see what's going on the cutting board. We'll get a few ingredients ready. If you're just joining us, I was saying at the beginning that, okay, now where's my other phone? There we go. I was saying at the beginning that I'm gonna use a food processor, and I'll make everything in the food processor right now. I'm gonna make all 4 recipes in here actually in an order so that I don't have to really wash it in between. Okay, so everyone can see my cutting board now, yes? Hopefully. All right, so I'm gonna use a bowl to put any scraps into. Peeling an onion. I have a white onion here. You can use a red onion. You can use a cooking onion, whatever you like. Sweet onion is great. My tip for peeling an onion is you want to leave the root end intact. If you didn't already know that, if you cut that root end out of there, then the whole onion falls apart when you're trying to cut it up. Okay, so we need about 1/4 of an onion here for the salsa later. So I'm just going to take about 1/4 of that out and set it aside. If you're dicing an onion by hand, what you want to do is take the half an onion, you're going to start to make little cuts through it with the grain, right? And then always keeping your fingers out of the way, keeping your fingers back, you're going to make some little cuts across it like this. And from there, you can then dice it up nice and fine, okay? So I'm going to do this in a second. What I want to do first is get a couple of other ingredients ready, and then we will work on, let me see here, what else do I have to do for this? Actually, I think we'll move forward. So that's the main thing, is just getting that. Make sure everyone has their oven on at 425. If you're not already done that, preheat your oven now, please. Number 1 rule, have your oven ready. I'm not sure if I wrote this in the recipe, but what I'm gonna do first is actually chop the pumpkin seeds up a little bit before I chop anything else up, just because they don't chop as easily as like onion and mushrooms do, yeah? So I'm taking about 1/4 cup of pumpkin seeds here. I'm not going to demo this on my cutting board just because it's going to make a huge mess. If you're doing this by hand, you're just pouring your seeds out onto the cutting board and going through that with a knife, slowly and patiently. If you try to go fast, they'll go everywhere. If you go nice and slow, up and down, back and forth, you'll get a nice fine texture. And I'll show you here in the food processor what texture I'm looking for roughly, okay? So put about 1/4 cup in. I'll bring the camera over here so you can see into the food processor, hopefully. That's okay. If you don't have a food processor, it's a great tool for saving a lot of time, but it's definitely not necessary. A little mini chop is a lot cheaper. So I'm chopping these up a little bit, but not completely, because I'm going to keep chopping everything else in here. What the pumpkin seeds do for this recipe is they add a bit of texture, so it does have a little bit more of a ground meat kind of texture. That's that kind of little, I don't want to say bristly bits, because that sounds gross, but the little kind of more mouthfeel. Chopping that a little bit, and then I'm going to start adding the other ingredients to this, okay? So if you're doing this by hand, again, you're roughly chopping the pumpkin seeds with a knife patiently. And I will go through some of the other ingredients here. So now moving over, if I'm doing this in a food processor, you don't have to waste a lot of time chopping stuff up, but you do need to help the food processor a little bit by roughly chopping stuff, okay? So with this onion, that was like a quarter of an onion. I'll cut that into like 4 pieces like this, big pieces, right? That then I'm gonna throw into the food processor, and that'll then get finished getting chopped in here. So I'm just gonna take this piece that I started earlier and chop that up, throw that in. So with the mushrooms, if you're using mushrooms, okay, again, if you're doing this by hand, the way that I would recommend to do it is to take, it's 2 cups we're using here, so I'll probably would do a cup at a time if I'm doing this by hand. I'm gonna roughly chop the mushrooms first, maybe about a half or a third of that 2 cups. Okay, imagine I'm doing all of that because I wanted to just do this in the food processor with most of it. So then I have them kind of roughly chopped. I'll take the knife, instead of a slicing motion in this case, because then it'll kind of go everywhere, it's just more of an up and down. And you just kind of keep, again, you have to be patient when you're trying to get stuff finely chopped. Keep drawing it back into the center, keep cleaning off your knife, and then go back at it again. If you do that 5 or 6 times, it'll take you maybe 5 minutes to do this job. I'll be yammering on here, so you can just go ahead and start doing that part, okay? Or if you're lucky enough to have slave labor with your children in the kitchen, then get them to start chopping mushrooms. Yeah, and you can keep doing the other stuff for the food, the other stuff to go. So for the food processor, I'm gonna cut these into about a half or a quarter. If they're really big, I'll quarter them. If they're smaller, I can just cut these in half. I've already kind of brushed off any dirt off of these. I don't wash my mushrooms personally. It's not the worst thing. I've seen some videos where they show they don't really soak up a lot of moisture. I just find they're slippery and hard to deal with when they're wet, so. Throwing all of those in, roughly chopped. Again, if you're doing this by hand, you're just being patient and kind of going at it, chop, 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 until you get it to a texture you want. They don't have to be a powder. Anyone that has cooked mushrooms before knows that they shrink up a lot when you cook them, so that'll happen on your sheet pan here in a second. All right, so tofu. Let's talk tofu. What I told some people, things you could do if you don't like mushrooms is you could double the tofu or you can add tempeh. So if you guys do not know the difference between tofu and tempeh, quick like vegan protein lesson, yeah. So they're both made from soybeans. They're made from a different kind, like a different species of soybeans, because there's not just one soybean, right? There's dozens of different kinds of soybeans. Tempeh is whole soybeans that have been inoculated with a mold culture, a good mold, right? Like there's good molds that are good for us, and it really helps to extract a lot of the nutrients, make it bioavailable, make it really easily digestible. Tempeh is very easy to digest. You don't get nearly as bloated from tempeh as you do from some kinds of tofu, because it's basically been already broken down by that mold culture, okay? It sounds gross, but it doesn't taste that bad. It works really well in a ground meat substitute. It has a similar texture. Tofu, I can only get an unsprouted tofu. So if you're buying tofu, I recommend, like, it has to be organic, ladies and gentlemen, please, right? Soybeans are the most GMO crop. It's just, you're getting all kinds of unknown stuff there in a non-organic tofu. Ideally, if you can get at your store sprouted or fermented tofu, anytime that something is sprouted or fermented outside of your body, it prevents that having to happen in your intestines, which is where bloating and gas comes from, right? So especially with plant-based proteins, including protein powders, if you can find a sprouted or fermented and or, like sometimes it's both, if you get it sprouted and fermented, then you will find that your gas and your bloating from your vegan protein pretty much disappears. That was my experience anyway. Okay, so for the tofu, if you're doing this by hand, I will show you what to do. I'm just gonna cut this open. You might have yours in like a plastic container with a plastic sheet on top. Puncture that over the sink or you'll have water go everywhere. Okay, so I'm just gonna take this out over my sink, throw out the packaging. And then I have here like a brand new clean tea towel. I don't use any fabric softener. I use Hippie laundry detergent, so I can use a tea towel for this. If it can be paper towel as well, right? And the reason you want to press your tofu is to take some of that water out of it, okay? So when you're cooking tofu, in most cases, what you're basically trying to do is to dry it out so you get a more chewy, more meat-like texture in most recipes, not always, right? So the more moisture I press out right now, the less I have to let it come out in the oven as steam, essentially, right? So I'm just pressing this as best I can with a clean tea towel or a couple layers of paper towel, right? That's good. I can use this tea towel now for cleaning up and stuff. And then, so your option here, if you are not using a food processor, people don't really realize maybe with tofu, you just kind of rip off a piece and crumble it up. And it's gonna come out really similar to the texture of ground meat. That won't take any time at all. Okay, so you can do it that way. and just kind of crumble it up with your fingers into whatever kind of texture that you want. If I'm going into a food processor, again, I'm helping the food processor a little bit, so kind of cutting it in half lengthways, and then just into really rough chunks that, again, my food processor is going to break up into smaller pieces here. Okay? And I'll show you the food processor in a second as I'm going at it.
Mike, are you putting the tofu with the pumpkin seeds and the mushrooms right now?
Everything is in my food processor because I have a large capacity food processor. Okay, great. So if you do not have a really large, like mine is like the 7 quarters, like some crazy large amount of capacity. Maybe you can't tell in the camera. I have big hands too, so that's not a good perspective. But yeah, so if you have like a mini chop, you would just do this in batches, right? Thank you for bringing that. That's a really good question. So if you're doing like what's one of those little mini chops, like I have one here actually, I can demo. These are great. This one I think only costs like something like that, right? Which is basically the same tool, only much smaller. This is a great tool to save you time. And you would just do literally like 6 to 8 mushrooms at a time in here, pulse, 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 like I'm about to do, and then dump it out and do all of this in batches. It might be like 6 or 8 batches to get through all the onions, the tomato, or the mushrooms and the tofu and stuff, right? But that would work just as good. Blenders and like magic bullets, it's a different blade, right? So food processors are blades that slice and chop, whereas a blender are blades that suck the contents through a vortex that like puree things. You can't do something like this in a blender unless you have one of those, I'll hate to say it, but those horrible ninja blenders that are all over the place with like the food processor blades up the center. If you have one, I'm sorry, I bought one too. It really sucks. You'll never get anything smooth with that because it's blades that are made to chop, not puree. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, and I'm sorry if you'll see some people laughing. I bought one too. I apologize. Buy a Vitamix or buy a Blendtec. I don't know.
Mike?
Yes. Yes.
Can we use sunflower seeds instead of pumpkin seeds?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. 100%. It's just, and you don't even need them. I think I put optional in the recipe. It just adds texture, right? So if you're the one, I think that it was at Debbie's household that's not using mushrooms, I would say definitely add them. That's who it was. Okay. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to start to pulse this. If you have a food processor, your food processor came with this weird hard plastic spatula that you probably never use. It's really, really amazing for using with your food processor. It has no other purpose, but I would recommend pulling it out of the drawer covered in dust when you're working with a food processor. So pulse, oh wait, gotta make sure everything's locked in place. Pulse a couple times, I'll pulse 5 or 6 times. And the key to getting everything kind of chopped evenly is really stirring it up every so often to make sure you get the chunks on the top get mixed in with the chunks on the bottom. So I may have overfilled this. It's okay. I'm not concerned about that. I'm just gonna pulse. And if you find that there's some big chunks that just won't mix, I'm actually gonna have to do this. So I'll just admit that I put too much in there. Thank you for ever calling me on it. You were right. So what I'm just gonna do is pull out some of the big chunks. I can pop them back in here in a second once I pull this out. So. You're looking for, like, I mean, we're trying to resemble the texture of ground meat, right? So everyone's probably seen some ground meat at some point in their life. You vegans out there, right? So just going at it until you feel like it's the right texture. And there's no issue if you get a chunk, like if there's a big mushroom comes out of here, you can just break it up with your fingers or even just leave it. It's not gonna hurt. Okay, so I've got that where I feel good about it. Some chunks in there, I can see they're being stubborn. I'll just pull them out. And I'll do this rest of this in a sec. Okay, so we're gonna move on to what's next. So we just wanna get this in the oven ASAP so it's ready for us to eat with it. So what I'm going to do next is now make like a flavored oil to mix all of this with. Make a nice big bowl here. Come back over here. And yeah, so what we're gonna put into here is the oil, the olive oil. Somewhere, there it is. Quick question about oils. So you can use any oil that you've got. A problem that a lot of people don't realize is with canola oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, these oils are really not very healthy for us. We've been wish-wash, sold false information about that over the decades. But yeah, those polyunsaturated fats are really not great for your body. Canola, if you're getting canola or sunflower, you want to be looking for like a cold pressed expeller press, which they cost a fortune and they're not great as far as flavor is concerned. They have a short shelf life. Extra virgin olive oil is my go-to. I'm an Italian. I think that's probably why, right? But avocado oil is pretty good. it has a carbon footprint that's not as great. You know, avocados, we're going to eat some today, and I will ruin your world about how they are really not great for the environment. You want to eat them definitely within moderation. I go on tangents. Oh, the oils, right. So just being aware, if you have sunflower, safflower oil, it's not like it's going to kill you, but those ones that come in a plastic bottle, the no name, the really low-priced oils that come in clear plastic on the grocery store shelf, they're oxidized, they've been heat treated, chemical treated to get rid of flavors and you know, unusual kind of chemical aftertastes, just so you don't know that they've already done that. So yeah, that's my tangent about oils. Get a good quality oil if you're eating oils. Yeah, you don't want to get low quality. They hurt your body pretty bad. Is there a question there? Yeah.
Yes, Mike, how much of the olive oil are you using in that bowl?
It's a quarter cup.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
a quarter cup. Yeah, no worries. So, okay, I'm gonna add some garlic to this. So I've got a garlic press. Any way you wanna chop the garlic, it can be chopped by hand. It can be done with like one of these, like if you have like a microplane or a grater of some kind, that works great too. So 1 clove of garlic is going into here. You know what, I'll put 2 because I peeled it already. So you put as much garlic as you like. If your like household is garlic fanatics, put 10 cloves in here if you want. It's not gonna taste bad. Okay, so that's the garlic going in. I'll need that again later, the press. So then all the spices. So chili powder, if you don't already know, chili powder is not just chilies, okay? Chili powder is like a seasoning blend that has, I think there's cumin, there's oregano. It depends on the brand. There's normally some garlic powder or something like that in it. So it just, you want to, if you're making Tex-Mex, because this is not Mexican food, right? This is Tex-Mex food. If you're making this kind of Tex-Mex, like Southwestern kind of flavors, you really do need a chili powder to get that flavor. Or you can make your own blend and use like a bit of cayenne, a bit of paprika, those kind of things, and the other spices. So that was chili powder, 1 tablespoon. I'm gonna add cumin, right? Because there's not quite enough cumin in there for my liking, so I'm gonna put a bit more. Basically what I'm doing here is making my own taco seasoning. If you just mix these spices together, you can put this into ground meat and you don't have to buy your old El Paso taco seasoning anymore. It's full of other kinds of chemicals to keep it from clumping and stuff. Okay, so now we've got a paprika here. If you like smoky flavor, you know, you can add smoked paprika. Some people are kind of repulsed by that. That's totally your personal preference. I'm putting in a teaspoon of paprika. This is not smoked paprika. I'm not repulsed by it. I just don't really want the smoky taste in this dish personally. That is your choice. And then oregano. So if you have Mexican oregano, bonus. This is Italian oregano. It will totally do the trick. 1 teaspoon of that.
So Mike, are you putting 1 teaspoon of each of those spices?
It's in the, yeah, so the amounts are in the recipe. It was 1 tablespoon chili powder, 2 teaspoons cumin, 1 teaspoon oregano, 1 teaspoon smoked paprika. If someone didn't get the recipes, please email me after this. I'll make sure to send them to you, okay? But yeah, so it was 1 teaspoon oregano, 1 paprika, 2 teaspoons cumin, and 1 tablespoon of the chili powder went into here already. And then I'm putting in now some sea salt. So this is 3/4 of a teaspoon of sea salt roughly. And then I'm adding chili flakes. So this is just ground up chilies, right? This is spicy. I like it spicy, so I'm just kind of freehanding it. You can put whatever you like in there. It can also be cayenne pepper, ancho powder, any of those kind of things that you have. Chipotle powder if you want it smoky again. And then you're gonna mix this up and you should end up with some kind of a black sludge looking thing, which is what you're aiming for. Brown, sludgy looking thing. Okay, so that's great. That's exactly what we want, is something that looks like that, okay? And then what I'm gonna do now is just dump in this food processor chopped up stuff. Okay, and I'm gonna use again. The reason for this is this special, you know, this hard plastic one is it really just gets into the corners better. Okay, food processor tip for those of you using a food processor. The hole into the blade goes up through the bottom of the food processor here. I'm trying to show you. So if you put your finger into that hole, you can kind of feel that you can grab onto the inside of the blade just like the food processor does to spin it. As you're scraping out here, that's gonna prevent your blade from falling out and making everything go all over your counter. And my other tip, this is like an old Martha Stewart tip, which I've known since like the 90s, right? Leave some chunks in the bottom if you need to, because this kind of gets all stuck all over the blade and it's a pain to scrape out. So what I'm gonna do now, move you back over here, I'm gonna put this back on here. A lot of you might already know this. It's not like it's a new thing, but if you don't use a food processor that often, close it all back up again, pulse it like 1 time. And when you pull the blade out now, the blade is basically free of any residue. So I'm just gonna have to give that a really quick rinse and we can use it to make the next dish. Scraping that out. I actually still have to chop the rest of the stuff for this mixture. So I'll grab that blade back. Yeah, Yeah, however many batches. If you do it in fewer batches, then it's less, like it goes easier. You know what I mean? If you try to overfill it like I did, then you end up having to pull it out, and it ends up taking longer. It's more of a mess, really.
Mike, what did you just put in there?
I put what I couldn't fit in before. That was a bit of the tofu and some of the mushrooms.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pleasure. It's the same thing here. So it's just going into the same bowl. So this is now the bowl that had all of the spices and the oil in it. I dumped in the chopped up mushrooms and onions and all that good stuff. Okay, I've got all that out of there. Just scrape it all out. So again, if you are using a food processor, you do not have to worry about really washing this. You can rinse it if you're feeling like you really need to. Like I'll probably rinse this right here just to get rid of some of the residue of the tofu and stuff. But the nice thing about when you're cooking plant-based is that you don't have to worry about cross-contamination really, right? Like there's not like I've got brown meat here that I'm then worried about, am I gonna get that onto something else? Everything's vegetables that you could eat raw if you wanted to. So you don't have to be nearly as stressed about, you know, keeping cutting boards separate and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna mix this up, and this takes a little while. You need to be patient until it's kind of all evenly distributed. You want all of that flavored oil to be all over this mixture here. While I'm mixing, because this will take about a minute probably, realistically. You got to keep mixing until it's all evenly distributed. Keep scraping along the bottom, yeah, because that's where it's all the flavor's gonna be. And yeah, so I just really want to quickly talk about plant-based and vegan and all that kind of stuff, because people I think don't really get that I'm not fully a vegan, right? So vegan and plant-based, they're a little different and really a lot the same. Vegan it's more of an ethical choice. So when you're vegan, there's no animal products in your life. You're not using any kind of textiles like wool or silk or anything like that. No animal products in your diet, no beeswax, none of that kind of stuff, right? Whereas plant-based is much more about a philosophy of kind of the quality of the food, being very natural as it comes from nature, and really avoiding animal products in most cases. In some cases, plant-based eaters eat no animal products. I eat a little bit of free-range eggs and some grass-fed butter here and there, and the odd meat that I know has been raised, sustainably and humanely, and all that kind of stuff. So it's really not my intention to make people vegans that never eat meat again. It's more about just kind of to get the impact that it has on your health to remove meat a couple of days a week, and the impact it has on the environment. Because really, taking meat off your table for it's 1 day a week, 3 days a week, it's like taking your car off the road for the year, is the statistic that I've heard. So that's pretty crazy if you think about it, right? And just starting to think about meat as more of an accoutrement, a condiment to a meal, rather than like the main staple in every single meal. Okay, so bring in a cookie sheet. This has got parchment paper on it. If you want to use foil, just spray it with some oil or brush it with some oil just so it doesn't stick. It shouldn't stick. It doesn't really stick that bad because it's got quite a bit of oil in it already. So I'm going to dump this whole mixture out onto here. A couple tips about roasting stuff. So this is like general tip for roasting something on a sheet pan in the oven. First of all, you want it in as even of a layer as possible. So start by doing that, spread it out. If you come across any really big chunks as you're doing this, just kind of break them up with your fingers. You can just like crush up a mushroom or anything. It's a huge chunk of onion, just pull it out. Okay, so I'm getting this into a pretty even layer, and then what you want to do, this is a really great tip that helps you get even browning. You want to make an opening down the center like this, okay? So just kind of push it back and forth, make an opening down the center, and then keep spreading out what you just moved aside, okay? So you're going to get that so it's now an even layer around the edge of the pan. What this does is it creates a second edge. So if you've ever roasted anything, which I'm sure most of you have, you probably know that the center doesn't brown the same as the edges do, right? The center's kind of not cooked as much or not browned as much. This will give us a second edge that will brown. The heat in the center of the pan will heat up more. You'll get more even cooking. And it's really great anytime you're roasting anything on a sheet pan. I would recommend doing that if you have the space in the sheet pan to make some space down the center. Okay, so that's nice and even, spread out. Okay, and I'm just gonna throw this in my oven at 425. It's in the center of the oven. And we'll move on to what's next. I'm going to set a timer here for 15 minutes, and in 15 minutes we will stir that up. The more times you stir it, the more brown it's going to get. The more brown it is, the more like texture it will have in your mouth. So, Okay, I'll probably forget to squeeze the lime juice over that, but if you remember, at the end when it comes out of the oven, if we add lime juice now, it just has to all evaporate to bring it, give it that texture we're looking for, so we squeeze it over at the end and give it some more texture. I'll bring you back over now, so I'll talk for a second here. Let me see. Okay, cool. So hopefully that was successful, step one. So what I'm going to do now, the order that I'm going to make the next 3 recipes in my food processor, I'm going to make the salsa, and then I'm going to make the guacamole, and then I'm going to make the taco sauce. Because then, like, from the salsa to the guacamole, I do not have to wash it at all. That kind of residue from the salsa is totally welcome in my guacamole. And then the taco sauce has some avocado in it, and lime juice, and cilantro, and all that stuff. So it doesn't really matter if there's, again, some residue from my guac left in the food processor to make the taco sauce at the end. And you can make the sauce in a blender. When we get to that, I'll talk about different options for that. So coming to the salsa, if you got the email, you should have washed all your produce already. If not, then get somebody or start washing your produce now. So what we're going to do, tomatoes, hopefully you had some time to buy tomatoes and let them ripen. These are actually Canadian tomatoes, which is really exciting that I could find some Canadian tomatoes already. I guess we're in May. It's hard to tell since we've had snow here. It had like a blizzard yesterday, which was awesome in Toronto. Blizzard for like 3 minutes, but blizzard nonetheless. Okay, so get all your stuff ready for this. So the jalapenos, I'm actually going to juice some lime here. I'm just going to juice 2 limes, and I'll use those probably for the recipes that I need. Oh, okay, wait, actually stop. So this is prepping. What we need to do first is take the zest off of one of the limes. So I'm just going to take, I have one of these zesters. That's one option. If you have a microplane, you can just literally grate it off. If you don't have one of these tools, what you can use is any kind of vegetable peeler. Right, and you'll just peel off a strip of lime zest like that, and you can just roughly chop it with your knife. We're going to throw this into a blender or something to mix it. And if you don't have any blender or anything mechanical to help you make the dressing later, just again, take your time and be patient and finally chop up the zest, okay? So I'm just going to set that aside for now. I will use that for my taco sauce later on. If you have a nice big cutting board, you can just leave it off to one side or scrape it into a bowl if you need to. And then, yeah, just juicing your limes. Again, I need the juice for the next 3 recipes, so I'm just going to juice all the limes at once, trying to save time so I'm not, pulling the juicer back out a bunch of times. Just get a whole bunch of juice ready. What I'm actually going to say, I just did that, and a tip if you did not realize is that citrus really dulls your chef's knife. I always use a serrated knife, almost always. So use something that's not a serrated knife, a bread knife, or like a steak knife is way better. If you're cutting through oranges and lemons and stuff with your big chef's knife all the time, your knife will be dull after like 6 or 8 lemons, and you'll have to keep sharpening it all the time. So stop using your chef's knife for citrus, please. Use a knife that has a serrated edge. Unless you want to dull your knife, that might be an option. I don't know. Dull knives are more dangerous than sharp knives. A lot of people don't realize because you get used to it being dull, and then it actually slips easier and stuff like that. A lot more injuries happen with a dull knife. Okay, so that's the lemon juice is done. I think I don't know that I need to be with this angle. I feel like it's much more useful for you to be looking at the cutting board right now still, so I'll come back. Come over here. I didn't say all the housekeeping at the beginning. Hopefully I figured it out. If you have it on spot, in the top right corner, you want to hit speaker view, and that will have just whatever I'm highlighting for you. If you're in gallery view, you see everybody. It might be a bit distracting. Okay, so over here, a rumor that I have heard is that curved jalapenos are more spicy than straight jalapenos. I have found it to be mostly true, but not necessarily always true. So just be aware of that when you're picking them. In this case, definitely the curved one is more spicy than the straight one. Little experiment if you want to play around with that. I like spicy again, so I'm leaving them whole like this. I'm doing everything in the food processor. If you're chopping them by hand, you want to always be aware with chilies, anyone that has that fun experience of like touching their eyes or even worse, their genitals after they've chopped chili peppers, that is a horrible, horrible experience. I've been there. You can wear gloves. I think gloves are a little bit paranoid if you're careful about it. If you're mostly touching the outside of the skin, like there's nothing on the outside that's going to bother you. It's all this white part, right? A lot of people don't realize, again, that the white part is what's spicy in a chili pepper. It's not the seeds. The seeds are spicy because they're touching the white membrane, the pith that's in there. So if you don't want it as spicy, you'll chop this in half. You can take the tip of a spoon and scrape all of that out of there with a spoon, and that will make it like 60 to 80% less spicy if it is hot in the first place. And with jalapenos, a lot of you might know that it's like some of them you get and they're just like a green pepper. There's absolutely no heat to them whatsoever. So you really got to kind of get a few and hope for the best. What I'm doing for the food processor is literally just rough hunking this up into big chunks, okay? If I'm doing it by hand, I would chop the halves into longer strips and then start to, again, roughly chop it up and then finely chop it up. If you're chopping it by hand finely, that's where you might want to use a glove, because then you're really getting a chance of getting a lot of those capsaicin molecules, those molecules that are spicy, all over your hands and into like your fingernails and stuff. You just want to be careful. It won't hurt your hands, but it'll hurt any like mucous membrane that you touch, eyes, mouth, all that kind of stuff. You want to be careful. Anyway, I'm rambling. Okay, so that was going into there, the jalapeno. For the pepper, okay, so I've got a red pepper that's washed. I'm just gonna cut down the edges of it. So I kind of cut down around the edges, following the white membrane and just leaving it in the center. It's the way I like to deal with a pepper most often, unless I'm doing something else with it. But right now I'm hacking it up, right? If you're doing this by hand, fine. You could do what I just did. You take each piece here and slice it lengthways. Keep your fingers out of the way of the knife. I think I need to do a knife skills Zoom class or something soon. That's probably something that will happen in the not too distant future. So if you don't already know how to use a chef's knife, please be careful, yeah? So that's what you would do, some strips, right? I've got like thin strips. You can have as chunky of a salsa as you like, and then I would chop that by hand across the strips and end up with something that's, you know, salsa texture roughly, yeah? So for the food processor, I can really roughly chop this up again. And I should be able for the salsa to put everything in here at once, because it's not nearly as many ingredients. If you have one of these pastry scrapers, that's great for picking up stuff off your cutting board. Probably use it way more often than that, for that than for using pastry purposes. Okay, so for tomatoes, again, I'm just cutting the core out. These are heirloom tomatoes. Any tomato you have is gonna work, right? If you have little mini tomatoes, they often have a much thicker skin, which is not bad when you're eating them individual, popping them in your mouth, but you'll find if you chop them up in a food processor, even by hand, they do have quite a bite to them. So it's not like it's bad, but you'll feel it in your mouth. Just I'm cutting the cores out of mine. And then again, rough chopping for the food processor. If you're doing it by hand, I don't think I need to, like, it's basically however you think is the best way to do it. You just try to get thin layers and then make strips and then cut the strips into chunks, right? That's basically how you will dice, and just taking your time. With tomato, the skin is quite tough. You want to slide your knife through it. Don't try to chop straight down like I did with the mushrooms. It'll just mash everything, right? You want to really use the length of your knife and let the blade slice through the stuff that you're cutting. So I'm going to rough chop this, throw it in the food processor. Everything as I'm just throwing it off camera here is going into the food processor. I don't know if you can see. You can. So I'm cutting each half of each tomato into like maybe 6 or 8 pieces. Yeah, it's big chunks if you're going into a food processor. Oh, lost a piece. Okay. So what else do we need here? Oh, the onion that we brought aside earlier. So if you were dicing your onion for your meat mixture, I should have maybe said earlier, but I would have just diced all of the onion at once if you were doing it by hand, right? I took this aside because I'm going to do it in the food processor. So I will chop this up a little bit smaller than for the meat mixture, just because I want it to chop evenly with all these other soft things in here. This is kind of like the harder thing that's going in. So kind of roughly chop the onion. I will add the cilantro right into this. So spin this. Okay, so if you don't like mushrooms, I can't defend you. You're just weird, okay? Because they're delicious. I don't get it. But if you don't like cilantro, that's a genetic thing. So I always do say, don't be mean to people that don't like cilantro. Like, they were born that way. They can't help being freaks, right? I'm just joking. I know lots of people. If you don't like cilantro, it tastes soapy. It's a genetic thing. Like, you actually can have a gene that makes you taste soap from a chemical that is in cilantro. So don't feel bad about yourself if you're that person. If you have that family member you've made fun of for years, they can't help themselves. Be nice. Just leave it out, yeah? What I would say, if you have that person in the household and everyone else likes it, then you just chop up what I've already put into here and add the cilantro, like take a bowl out, which I'm gonna do, like you can do that with the guac too, take it out and then add the cilantro at the end, right? So you have both options for people. People feel really appreciative if you make them a special one with no cilantro, if you have that person in your life, right? If you love cilantro, you can eat pretty much the entire thing. In Indian cuisine, they go all the way down to the roots. If you clean them up well enough, it's all totally edible and delicious. I'm gonna cut just the roots off because it's a bit tough for a salsa. But I'm actually gonna throw all of these stems into here for mine, okay? You might not want to, but they're very tender. If you chew on one, you'll see it's much more tender than like a parsley stem. I am gonna chop them up a little bit because they won't chop super fine in the food processor just from the kind of fiber that's in them. Again, like try not to waste stuff, right? There's nothing wrong with that. It tastes good. If you like cilantro, add it in. And then I will roughly chop all the cilantro. Some of this is gonna go into the other dishes, but I'll just kind of leave that again to the side of my cutting board for now. Take a handful to the food processor. And then I'll move you guys over here again. I wish there was a way to zoom. I can't to zoom on Zoom. I don't think you can like zoom the camera in closer. It just gives you whatever the angle is that they decide at the beginning. And knows the difference, and that would be good for future use. Okay, so there we are. We're gonna now, oh, I put this on backwards. We're gonna set this up. Plate in place. Again, it's just pulsing, okay? I have not added the salt and pepper yet, and you can add this now or at the end. If you add the salt right before you chop everything, it tends to make the moisture come out a little bit more vigorously, like it makes it really soupy. Depending on what kind of tomatoes you had, some tomatoes have a lot more juice than others. This can get really watery and need to be strained. Other times, if it's like a Roma tomato or one that's really meaty, then you won't have much juice in it, it won't be bad. I'm gonna pulse now, so just a couple of pulses. You see this is not nearly as full as the mushroom mixture was. So that was like 5 pulses. I'm gonna scrape it down again. A lot of people might have food processors and they kind of sit there in a cupboard not being used. You can do like an entire meal like this and it just saves you so many dishes. So pulsing that was like maybe 8 to 10 pulses total. I would call that done, okay? So that's, if I can get it a bit closer for you. You know, like it's nice and chunky. I like it. If you want it thinner, then chop it thinner, right? That's your call. So I'm gonna now add to this the other ingredients and then I'll just pulse it through once to mix it, okay? So I'm gonna add in here a tablespoon of lime juice. Fresh lime juice, please. If you have that little plastic lime in your fridge, I mean, I suppose, but just like it tastes so much better when you get a fresh lime if you have the option. I get that the pre-squeezed stuff is nice to last a while. It's had all the flavor cooked out of it. Okay, and then for the salsa, half a teaspoon of salt and a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. So I'm just gonna eyeball the pepper. If you want this spicier and you don't have like a hot jalapeno, you just add cayenne, right? Cayenne's basically just capsaicin. There's not a whole lot of flavor to cayenne pepper. It's really just like mind-blowingly spicy. So it's a nice option if you do want it to be that spicy. And then for the salt, it's half a teaspoon of salt that I'm just gonna add into here. And then I'll just pulse it like 1 or 2 times just as for the purpose of mixing it through. And I'll scrape down 1 more time just in case there's any chunks up near the top. Pulse, and that's probably all that it needs. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this out into a bowl. If you're, storing it in a container, do that. If you are making all full recipes and you are not a family of 4, like if you're somebody that's like, this is too much, this stuff will keep for several days in the fridge. Okay, so I would recommend you can either have the recipes, obviously, I feel like that's obvious, or make the full amount. And what I would say, when you're making a big recipe like this, if you want it to last longer, like put it into 2 containers, right? So put aside half of it or 2/3 of it right now into a clean container right into your fridge, and then whatever you're going to use for dinner into a separate bowl. When you're done dinner, do not mix the dirty salsa into the one that you set aside, right? Because you're trying to keep it not contaminated, and keep them in separate bowls. The same with the guac. Like I'm going to portion my guacamole into 3 separate containers so that it'll last several days in my fridge. Okay, so the salsa again. Put your finger into the bottom there so that you can get the blade. Yeah, hold on to the blade as you're dumping this out. Put that in there. I'm not even going to do the little trick with the pulsing the blade because if you're in a food processor having the same experience, this just slides right out. With the guac, it's going to be very different. Okay, so a little bit of residue, you do not have to worry about this. We're just making guacamole in your food processor. So if you're doing the food processor option, liberated to not clean it. It's great. Okay, so I'm going to cover that up and set it aside. One done. So now, moving on to the guacamole. I should be almost getting to where we're going to have to mix our meats here. Oh yeah, okay, so we'll pause because we're 1 minute away from mixing the meat. What I will do is I'm just going to set aside my cilantro here. I think I can leave that lime zest there, but just so I can bring this tray over and show you. So, don't quite smell the tacos yet. just barely near the oven. But yeah, pull yours out and just see, or you don't have to pull it out now. I'm gonna pull mine out right now. We're just at about 15 minutes. Okay. What you should have right now is something that looks kind of like this. Okay, so it's darkened in color a little bit. Now, to mix it, wear something on your hand. Obviously, that's a really beat up old glove. It's not, it's actually it's been bleached repeatedly. It won't come clean. But yeah, so what you're gonna do now is start from the edges, okay? The other nice thing about the center here is it gives you space. So I'm gonna take the spatula, I'm gonna start at the edges and kind of flick everything in towards the middle. This is how I'm gonna start here. So from around the edges, flick everything towards the middle. In towards that like opening that you had created, right? And then you can kind of scoop underneath the part that was in the middle. You wanna stir that up a little bit. Okay, lots of steam. I didn't say that. I really should have said that before. Hopefully no one just burned their face when they open their oven. When you are cooking something with this much moisture, when you pull open the oven after 15 minutes, that is like a burn into your eyeballs and your face waiting to happen. So please stand back as you're opening the oven door. Let that first wave of steam come out of there. So now what I'm doing, I made the big mound in the center. I kind of stirred it up as much as I can. And then now I'm just doing exactly what I did before. So starting to spread it out into a thin, even layer. Okay, and if you have multiple people in your kitchen, you can be doing this step every 5 minutes. The more you mix it, the more it's gonna brown and the better the end texture is. You could eat this right now. Again, this is not meat. There's no undercooked from the regard of it being unsafe for you. There's only undercooked from the texture, right? This is totally ready to eat right now if you wanna eat it. And like if I cook this for another 30 minutes or 20 minutes, it's gonna have a very different texture and mouthfeel. So I'm just now again making that opening down the center, spreading it out into an even layer. You don't have to be crazy about it being perfectly even. And then just get it back into the oven, yeah? So it can keep cooking. Okay. So now we are going to work on guacamole, and I will give you my little avocado spiel. If you didn't already, so quickly my YouTube spiel. If you're not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do that. Yeah, Move, Nourish, Heal. I've been doing not just yoga videos. There's also plant-based cooking stuff coming on there. My intention, I'm just kind of getting the feel here of being a content creator, so I want to eventually have like a how-to food video and a recipe video each week. So I'm thinking like coming up, there's going to be avocado 101, like 5 different ways to slice an avocado type of thing. Knife skills, those kind of things are coming. But yeah, so I did a guacamole, the best guacamole recipe a couple weeks ago on my YouTube channel. This is my recipe that I've used for workshops and made for years. I get the feedback it's the best from a lot of people. I like just a very simple Mexican guacamole. Like I don't even put cilantro. I don't even always put onions or garlic or anything in it. Like in Mexico, and I'm not a Mexican and I'm not an expert on this, but from my understanding, it's usually avocado, salt, lime, sometimes not even lime. Not always garlic. Like it's really regional, but it's not, you know, chopped tomato and chopped onion and all that. That's very much, again, a Tex-Mex kind of thing. So if you like that, by all means, you can add like a spoonful of your salsa into your guac. It's basically the same thing. That's kind of my issue is I've never really understood why I want to put tomato and onion in my guac because I'm normally having guac with salsa and what's the point? Like that's my thinking. If you like it, I don't judge you at all. Put it in, right? But I'm just making a really simple guac here. So there will be some residue in mine because I didn't wash my food processor, right? Okay, so chopping an avocado. I have tons of avocados. These might actually not look great because I bought tons. These are my older ones. We'll see what I need to do. But avocado hand is literally a thing at the hospital. Doctors and nurses know what it is because they have like a lot of ER cases every year of people hacking into their hands when they're prepping avocados. It really makes me wince even thinking about like this kind of a thing. I'll clear, I'm a chef. I've probably cut open like, you know, multiple thousand avocados, and that's not a joke, right? So for me, yeah, if I'm being honest, I do it in my hand like this, right? And I'm really careful and I feel the knife and I can easily cut myself, right? But if you're somebody that is newer to using a knife, and this is something when you're working with something that's got mixed textures, like, you know, like a sweet potato or a pumpkin or a butternut squash or something like an avocado that's really soft around the outside and hard in the middle, that's where you set yourself up for the knife slipping and where you can cut yourself unexpectedly, right? So what I said in my guacamole video, what you want to do is set the avocado on the cutting board. You know, your fingers can be there, but keep them back from the knife. And I'm going to cut straight down till I hit the pit. I'm going to turn it on its side now. With my fingers on top of the avocado, I'm just going to turn the blade around the pit. So it's the same thing I just did in my hand, only there's pretty much zero chance of me cutting myself, okay? Then from there, I'm gonna turn them apart. If you're somebody that's made guac 1,000 times, you're like probably like this guy's paranoid. Just do what you do, as they say, right? But just be careful if you're somebody that's kind of newer to doing it. I'm always amazed how many people have no idea what to do with an avocado and buy all of their guacamole. It's so easy to make, right? So again, cut down to the pit, cut around the pit. Mr. B just found his toy. You're good? Just lie down, buddy. You're okay. Never gave you any vegetables. I'm a monster. Okay, so then the last one here. Actually, I don't think I need 4. I brought 4 because in case one was gross. So now what I'm going to do again, this is where a lot of the injuries happen would be this maneuver where you take the pit in your hand, you kind of hack the knife towards it like that, right? And you can just imagine how horrible an injury could be if you did that with a sharp knife and it slipped, okay? Slips off the blade, boom. Like you're really near your wrist. You don't want to play with that. So on the cutting board, hack into the pit, and then with your fingers back from the blade, just twist it. It's going to come out. If your avocado's ripe, it's really easy to deal with. If you've got an avocado, I actually have a good one here. It's kind of got, you know, maybe you've had one with that weird kind of oblong pit that's really tender and it doesn't want to come out. What I would recommend is first take it. Think about like what is that? Like where you're trying to like kind of push up from the center. And I don't know if you can see that, but I'm kind of loosening the pit a little bit. Can you see that now? So just by pushing up, and it's kind of like the pit's actually, I can pull that out with my finger even. I don't even have to use the blade. If it's ripe enough, that's going to happen. I can tell that this pit, if I hacked my knife into it, was just going to splinter into pieces. So you're seeing that. Worst case scenario is you take a spoon and you just scoop the pit out with a spoon, right? Okay. So what I need to do right here is I need a little bit of the avocado for my dressing. What you can do is you can scoop some out right now. I'm just going to do that for the sake of argument, about a half of one of a half, so a quarter of an avocado. You can also just add a spoonful of your guacamole into your taco sauce recipe later. That's also a completely valid option. Okay, I need a sip of water, man. A lot of talking. Those of you that have been to my workshops know that it's basically just 3 hours of me talking, so I'm not. This is easy for me, just to ramble on. Okay, so a couple tips for doing the avocados now. If you're making your guac without a food processor, right? So what you can do is you can, when you're mashing up an avocado, I find if you take it and you kind of help yourself, again, it's almost like when I'm rough chopping for the food processor. Even if I'm using a fork or a masher, I'm just going to go with the tip of the spoon and roughly divide up the avocado a little bit. So you can see that now. It's kind of been roughly, now when I scoop it up, it's just going to make it a lot easier to mash. You don't have to do this. This is just kind of it's like really maybe not necessary. I find it just saves a bit of time. For the food processor, this is absolutely necessary. You can't just bung avocado halves into there and hope that that's going to make it into guac. It really needs to be broken up a little bit. And again, I'm just using the tip of the spoon. If I'm working by myself, yeah, I'm going to use the tip of a knife because I can really feel, I've been using a knife for a long time and I can kind of feel that it's not getting through the skin. This is another step where you can easily puncture the tip of the knife into your hand. So you don't need to do it with a knife. You can easily do this with a spoon, right? It's just whatever you've got going on. So that's all prepped now. I'm going to come back over to my food processor. Okay, and we're going to now scoop this out. If you have, you should probably already have a spoon. You were just using it, right? So scooping that into the food processor. All the avocado halves. If you're picking avocados, or you're not sure, I just lost a chunk of skin somewhere. If you're not sure how to pick avocados, if they're green, they're not ripe. That's pretty much a given. They're going to be more of a darker, really a dark, I mean like light green, I'm saying. They're always green, I guess, but a really dark green whenever they're ripe. If you are buying avocados and you have the option, try to buy them without the stems removed out of the top of them. If the stem's been taken out, it's really hard to tell how ripe they are. You can be that guy that pops the stems out at the grocery store, right? If you pop the stem of an avocado out and it's bright green underneath, then you're going to have a really nice green ripe avocado inside. If you pop the stem off and it's black or brown underneath, then it's probably already on its way to being overripe. So just being aware of that. Okay, so that is the avocados in there. So this is pretty simple. Now I'm going to press a small clove of garlic. Again, however garlicky you like your food to be, you can put 4 cloves of garlic in here if you want. If you're all by yourself or everyone in the family is eating it, then who cares, right? So again, Paul, you can chop it roughly. You can do it in a press, whatever you need to do there for that. I'm going to add 1 thinly sliced green onion. This is optional again, but I just think it adds some nice flavor. So I'm you want to chop this a little bit. It doesn't need to be super thin, but if you do like 1-inch chunks of green onion in a food processor, it doesn't chop very nice. So I've just got this kind of roughly chopped, maybe like a centimeter slice of 1 green onion. 2 tablespoons of the lime juice. If you're making guacamole and it doesn't taste good, there's going to be 2 things. It's probably A, not enough lime juice, and B, what it is almost always is not enough salt, okay? So salt has gotten a bad rap. Yes, you want to be aware of your sodium intake. If you're eating processed foods, and salt is something you want to be very aware of because you're probably taking in a hell of a lot more than you realize. But if you're eating healthy food at home, you don't take in nearly as much salt as you might think. Nigella Lawson, I think, was the one that said it, that avocados are insipidly bland and they love salt, right? You need salt in your avocados or they're just like, it's flavorless. And if you make horrible guac that's like mungy and clingy and it just needs salt and lime, that's what it needs to be fixed. That's all that it needs. So that's lime, that's garlic, that's green onion. I'm gonna put now the salt into here. So I do, it's about 1/4 teaspoon of salt per avocado is what you need for, in my opinion. Everybody's salt threshold is different, okay? So start with less and add more. If you're somebody that doesn't use a lot of salt, then you need less salt than somebody that does. If you're a smoker, then you need way more salt than someone that doesn't smoke, right? It's just the way your taste buds are affected by the salt. And then the cilantro. So I'm gonna add in that chopped cilantro that I had set aside from earlier. Okay, so I think that was everything. Went in. This is like, don't blink here or you'll miss this. Guacamole in a food processor is not a very long procedure. It's like, I would say 4 pulses, scrape down 2 pulses, and we're probably done, realistically, depending on how thick or thin you like it. If you like that really, so if you like really thin guac, right? A lot of you maybe had that guac that's like light lime green texture and it's super light and fluffy. Add like 2 tablespoons of water into this and let it run, okay? So what they've added water if the guac is super thin. It's a way that restaurants make cheaper guac. Like you can add like 1/4 water to it essentially and thin it out by blending it and makes it kind of aerate. If you like that, go for it, right? It almost makes it like sour cream. So there, that was about 4 or 5 more pulses, and I'm gonna call that done for me. I like my guac to have a little bit of texture still to it. So come back over here, I'll show you a bit closer up, and then just again. Oh, okay, the guac, the pit. I threw my pit into my vegetable bowl here, so it's still clean. With the avocado pit, okay, this is an old Mexican grandmother tip, is that you put the pit in the top of your guacamole and it prevents it from going brown, okay? So I've seen videos on YouTube where they claim to debunk this, and I disagree with the debunking because what I've heard is that this is the science that I have heard, and again, I don't know how valid it is, but it seems to work for me, is that when you cut into the pit, it starts to release a gas, ethylene gas, which is the gas that vegetables basically ripen with, okay? So when you cut this pit open, when you hack into it, it is the damaged pit that gives off this gas. And supposedly the gas is heavier than air, so it makes a layer of this gas over the surface of the guacamole that then, and it's obviously not a deadly gas or anything, it's totally safe. But that gas then covers the surface so oxygen can't touch the guac so it doesn't brown, okay? If you do what I'm about to do, I have had guac in my fridge for 3 days untouched where it is completely green with absolutely no discoloration, okay? Not 3 days where I scoop some out every single day, right? That's completely different, but if you set it up like I'm about to show you, leave it in the fridge, the untouched guac will stay green for days. I give you my like almost guarantee. Another option that works just as well, which is I find kind of gross, is you can cover the surface of your guac with like 2 millimeters of cold water before you put it in the fridge. You take it out the next day, dump the water off, and stir it up. And it thins it out ever so slightly each time you do that. But that, again, obviously the water protects the top from going brown, okay? So what I do is I just kind of, with the knife, with the pin on my cutting board, I hack the knife into it, and I just start tapping gently until the pit splits into 2, okay? So now I have 2 that I can use for 2 different bowls of guac to keep it from going brown. You can do this and leave it uncovered in your fridge for 3 or 4 hours with the pit in there. It will not go brown. Like I promise you. If it does, please message me because I want to know what happens. It's never happened to me. I'm going to get out some containers here. I'm going to do, like I said earlier, 3 small containers just because I'm going to eat some tonight, but most of this will be for the next couple days. All right, again, so your food processor, okay? I'm going to put my finger up and hold the bottom, the blade, stick it in there. I'm going to scrape out most of this, but not worry too much about being really close to the blade. This kind of consistency is where that trick that I showed you earlier is like a blessing because the blade gets so much gunk on it here, and it's really hard to get it off just by scraping it. So I've taken most of the guac out of here now. Okay, you can see it's mostly taken out. I'm going to put this whole apparatus back on the food processor. I'm going to pulse it 2 times. And when you pull the blade out, you have a blade that is like basically completely clean and ready to go. Okay, so I can just use that to make my taco sauce in a second. And then now whenever this is out of here, this is where, again, this special spatula for the food processor, it's got a flat side. It's the exact right angle to get you right into the bottom and get all the stuff out of your food processor. So that's why it's kind of, it doesn't have any use other than scraping out a food processor. It's useless for a bowl or anything, but it works for this. So I'm going to do like that. This is great because if you want to make guac for a few days, like just package it in multiple containers and it will last in your fridge. You don't need preservatives in it. The citric acid is actually the preservative that's in the lime juice, right? Okay. What I'm going to do now is tap it. Okay, if you tap it, it'll get rid of air bubbles and it'll flatten it out. Tap it generously. Okay, and then just set the pit in. So what you're going to do is you're going to put the pit in the top with the cut side up and just push it down a little bit. Like that, okay? Now, if you're doing one big bowl and you're putting the pit inside of it, what you can do that'll help it a little bit is that if I want to eat some of this, I will scrape a spoonful out from beside the pit, put that in a separate bowl, spread this into a thin layer, flatten it out again, and put it back in the fridge. You just don't want to like dip chips into a bowl of guac and put it back in the fridge. It'll be disgusting by the next day, I promise you, right? That guac that you've already like left out in the air and you've been putting your fingers near it and dipping chips in, maybe double dipping if you're eating it by yourself, that guac is not going to last in the fridge as long as this one that's been, separated into a clean container. So I'm going to pop those in the fridge and keep one aside for dinner. I am now going to pull out this taco meat and show you again before I move on to the last recipe, to kind of see how it's coming along. Again, watch your face, guys. I just almost did it to myself there. It's really not a joke. That can burn your eyeballs pretty bad if you do that without watching it. Okay, so then last here, not last, but one more time, I'm going to do this in towards the center. You can see it gets darker every time. What you'll notice right here, as you mix it, what's underneath is totally white still. Well, not totally white, but much lighter than what's on top. This is why the more often you mix it, the more evenly browned it's going to get, right? If I was doing this every 3 to 5 minutes for 20 minutes, it takes less time, first of all, because it's going to brown way faster. I don't know if you can see on camera how much steam is pouring off of this, but like all the steam pouring off is what we want right now. We want this to dry out and get more texture. So I'm going to make the opening down the center, finish spreading it out, and I'll pop this back. I think we're up to right now about 25 minutes. It should be done. Again, it's done whenever you want to eat it, but in the next 5 to 10 minutes, probably 10, we'll be ready to go. If you're struggling to get it to brown, again, this is not a science. You're not worrying about an internal temperature like you would be with meat. Put it at 450, put it at 475, just keep an eye on it, right? Or even like a low broiler, stir it every 2 to 3 minutes. Whatever you want to do to get it brown as you can. Okay, so the last recipe here, we're gonna make the taco sauce now. Like I said, I'm doing this in the food processor. Like I wouldn't normally make a sauce in a food processor, right? Like I said earlier, the blade of a blender is more, designed for blending up something. What I'm doing is gonna work in a food processor. I'm not really worrying about an emulsion here. Avocado emulsifies dressings really, really well. So a little tiny bit of avocado into any vinaigrette is essentially gonna make it stay together. I'll often cut any avocado or any vinaigrette recipe that I'm making. I can put like a quarter of an avocado into there and a quarter cup of water, like maybe 2 tablespoons of water, and that will replace most of the oil in a dressing recipe and still give you a nice velvety texture, especially if it's made in a Vitamix or a Magic Bullet or something. Okay, so what we're gonna do now, I'm just gonna start dumping ingredients into the food processor for this dressing, okay? And what we're aiming for here is like, we can call this kind of like a taco sauce, a burrito sauce, whatever, a taco salad dressing, whatever you want to call it, right? I've got some avocado, so I'm just going to throw that in. That's that avocado that I had saved from before. Okay, it says half here. I'm actually going to half this recipe because I don't need this much dressing, but actually, no, I won't. I'll add a scoop of my guac, like I said earlier. Right, so you can, just like I said at the beginning here, you can take You don't have to keep avocados separate. If you are doing this all together, you might as well, you can just add like a spoonful of the guac into it. It's basically all the same ingredients. It's just more stuff in the dressing. Okay, some more garlic. I'm gonna add a clove here. Garlic is totally to taste. As you can tell, I like garlic, and I'm here all by myself. The dog doesn't mind if I have garlic breath. Quarter cup of olive oil. Now you do need to add water to this, okay? If you don't add any water to it, it will be super, super thick. Avocado, like I was just saying, has got a crazy emulsification property to it. So you add as much or as little as you want. If you want this super thick, you can try to do it without any water and see what happens. But 1 or 2 tablespoons will make a huge difference for it being like a drizzly consistency more. Some lime juice here, 2 tablespoons of lime juice. I have a little bit more than 2 tablespoons left. I'm just gonna add whatever's left into there. Cooking is not an exact science, guys, right? If you like things a little bit more acidic, add more. If you like it more salty, add more. More spicy, you just like kind of adjust. Tasting is so important. Keep tasting stuff as you go. A tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. This can just be all lime juice or just all apple cider vinegar. I like the difference of the 2 acids. I find it does give it a bit of a different, more of like a sour creamy kind of, if you want to call it that, flavor. You could add nutritional yeast to this if you're a vegan that likes nutritional yeast. It will give you a bit of that sour creamy kind of flavor as well. Now, for the sweetness, I just have some maple syrup here a little bit. This is optional. My advice to you, I also get feedback a lot that I make really good vinaigrettes, right? And what you will find is that things need to be balanced, right? A spoonful of sugar helps everything go down. Mary Poppins was right. And when you're making a dressing, you want to balance sweet, sugar, salt to make it the most pleasing to the palate. The Kraft salad dressing or whatever that you might love, any bottled salad dressing, they have engineered that in the lab to have a perfect balance of sugar, salt, and acid. And I guarantee that almost every commercial salad dressing has sugar in it. So I would add it in. If you're really opposed to it, leave it out. A little bit of chili powder in here. 2 teaspoons. I am using measuring spoons here just to kind of stay in integrity with the recipe. I would normally just be bungling these spices in by eye, which I encourage you to do if you feel comfortable. That lime zest from earlier, add that in. Bit of salt.
Mike, I missed the spice that you put in there. What did you put in there?
That was more of the chili powder. The chili powder.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, yes. I've in the past made big batches of taco seasoning. You can make from that first meat recipe, you can add all those ingredients, mix it up, keep it in a jar in your pantry, like the spices. And just, you could add a spoonful of that if you have the taco seasoning you like if you buy the big Costco thing of taco seasoning, you can really kind of replace these spices with that if that's what you have around. Some black pepper. Lime zest, black pepper. Okay, 1 more green onion. I'm gonna slice this up a little bit more thin because I do want this to come out as like a dressing. So just a little thinner.
Sorry, Mike, that was chili pepper and
Yep.
what?
Chili powder I put in there. So the ingredient here, I'll go through all the ingredients I've added so far. Okay, so I added in the avocado. I added in garlic, 1/4 cup of extra virgin olive oil, 2 or 3 tablespoons of water, 2 tablespoons of fresh lime juice, a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar or more lime juice, a bit of maple syrup or honey or sugar or stevia, whatever you have to balance with a bit of sweetness, 2 teaspoons, or actually 1 teaspoon of chili powder. I'm using my old recipes that I updated here. So 1 teaspoon of chili powder, 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of lime zest, black pepper, and a green onion, okay? And now I'm just gonna blend this all up until it's smooth. So this now I'm not gonna pulse. I'm just gonna turn on the food processor and let it do its magic. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all of the recipes, okay? So what I'm gonna quickly talk about here, different ways you can eat this now, okay? So if you are, I will finish doing what I'm finish making this. Okay, so that is basically what you're looking for. Is something that looks kind of like, here, I'll show you a bit closer up. It's not the most appealing color, but it tastes pretty good from my experience. So this will not discolor. Just because there's some avocado in it, you might think it's going to change color on you. It'll actually be fine because of the fact that there's so much lime juice in it. So much acid, like there's like 3 kinds of acid in there, right? So I'm just gonna now transfer this to a container. Again, the exact same, I sound like a broken record, but it really helps save time and mess just to hold onto that blade in the back. Like something I learned on Martha Stewart Living when I was like in high school, and I've always remembered it just makes it so much easier. If you find chunks in there, it's not the end of the world. You can blend it up as much as you need to. So again, putting this back on, pulse it one time, and then we're done. The food processor can go aside. Okay, I didn't talk about how to make this last one by hand, so let me quickly talk about that as well. So if you are not using a food processor, everything would go into a blender or a magic bullet if you have that option. If you have no mechanical device, it's as finely as possible mashing up the avocado into a fine paste, adding in the garlic to that, all the other ingredients, kind of blending it up with a fork or a whisk as best you can. It might be a bit chunky. It's kind of like watered down guac, but it's not going to be the end of the world. And then add the green onion right at the end. If you're trying to whisk up green onion, it'll get all stuck around your whisk blades. Okay, that's it. So I'm scraping this out. Is there another question there? Somebody? Okay, so that is that. That was all 4 recipes done. So what I was gonna say about how to eat this. So I personally, I've always been a taco salad person. I remember even when I was a little kid and we did taco night, I always had a taco salad. If you like the taco shells, go for it, right? Please heat up any of that stuff. It makes such a difference for the taste of it. If you like throw the taco shells in the oven for a few minutes, I think it's kind of obvious. A lot of people realize that about taco shells. I'm gonna come back to the other things here in a second. But you don't realize like the nacho chips are the same thing as a taco shell. So every time you make like chips and salsa, throw your chips on a cookie sheet and pop them in the oven. Where are we here? I want to go over here like that. Okay. So yeah, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to take some of these. I love this brand, K-Pasa. And with just like I said earlier about the soy with the tofu, I would say try to get organic corn chips if you can. Again, corn's like probably even more GMO than tofu is, right? So this tastes better too, right? And this one, so this is made, these are fried in canola, but I believe it's the expeller crust, if I'm not mistaken, like I was talking about. Let me see here. Not even. It's not even. So again, something like this, right? This is where you have to start to question, like, you know, how crazy do you want to be about what you're putting into your body? So I want to have a handful of tortilla chips with my dinner. I'm not concerned about the fact that they're fried in a certain kind of oil. It's a handful. I do buy potato chips fried in avocado oil, right? Because the avocado oil is a better oil for going up to high temperatures. It doesn't oxidize as much. It doesn't affect my digestion as much. If I eat Lay's potato chips on a gas balloon, if I eat the avocado oil kettle chips, I have absolutely no reaction to them, right? So what I say to people is to test it on yourself. These chips don't affect me. If I eat like one Dorito, all the modified milk ingredients and stuff in there destroys my stomach. So it really depends on you, your body, what you're eating. Organic with something that is a GMO crop just lets you then know that there's been no pesticide. It's not a GMO plant. And it just kind of makes me feel a bit better about what I'm putting in my body. There's not going to be any residual pesticide on these chips, right? I'm going to throw a small handful onto a little cookie sheet I have, and I'm just going to throw this into the oven for the last few minutes that the meat is cooking. And basically, if you're doing this, all you want to do is long enough till you hear them sizzling. When you open the oven door, you'll hear the kind of the fact that they were fried and sizzling a bit. It'll be like you got a bowl of freshly fried nachos at a Mexican restaurant. Don't burn your face. I just did that. You gotta be careful. It's so easy to forget. And that's basically, so the other thing, I like to make kind of like lettuce wrap tacos. I was saying to my mom, she's like, oh, I don't have anything to eat it on. And you can do it with romaine, right? So what I do, basically a romaine leaf, the ones right down the center are a bit small, but if you think about a romaine leaf, it's kind of, I'm gonna bring the camera closer to see if that works. This is a bit too far away. Oh yeah, I should have done this at the beginning, right? That's much better. You guys can see anything I was doing back there. So basically what I'll do, that's much better. Oh my God, okay. So just fill the taco up, right? Like it's a taco shell, fill it up. You kind of fold the stem in over top and you can eat that kind of like a burrito. It's really, really easy to deal with. So it definitely takes a skill to eat things in a lettuce wrap. Anyone that has tried, like if you go to almost any burger restaurant now will let you get something in a lettuce wrap, right? And it's definitely not easy to eat, I wouldn't say, but it's not impossible. And the more you practice, most things, like I'm very satisfied by eating tacos out of lettuce. And you know, again, maybe I have a couple of chips to kind of pick up whatever's in my plate or whatever, but this, like you eat 4 or 5 of these, you feel like there's crunch and it's really a satisfying experience. So you don't need, what I'm trying to say is you don't necessarily need anything that is like a fried corn chip type product, right? So I'm gonna have some tonight, but I don't always, and you don't need to have them. I'm not somebody that thinks any food is good or bad inherently. It's more about, like, my philosophy is about really listening to your body. If you eat something all the time that makes you feel terrible, you take it out of your diet and all of a sudden you don't feel terrible anymore, you just need to acknowledge that, right? A lot of us kind of glaze over those moments. That was a big one, like with the potato chips for me. I noticed a huge difference, and I don't eat potato chips regularly, but when I do, I buy those ones because they don't make me feel gross, right? And the same thing with the tofu. Like if I notice a difference, this will probably bloat me a little bit compared to the sprouted tofu. And again, it's not terrible. I'll take a little bloating over, you know, so the environmental impact and the kind of ethical impact of eating factory farmed animal products. So I think all I need to do now is show you guys this meat one more time. I think we're almost there. Yes, I'm going to show you that, and then we can unmute if anyone has questions. I think that what I've learned is that if everyone unmutes themselves, it's kind of like mayhem. So we'll do like a question and answer if you guys want a few more minutes, if anyone has any questions. We're now 7:15. We're basically done. If you have a question, please unmute yourself and chat with me. I'm going to pull the meat out, and we'll just be going to show you that one more time, put it in a bowl, and then I'm ready to eat. So hopefully you're almost there with me. But if anyone had any questions, if something is like not turned out, or you're maybe still waiting, you're going to start cooking it soon, please ask now. That's what I'm here for. I'll just show you like this, I think is fine, right? So it's definitely, again, a lot darker than it was when we started. What you will see here, it's still going to be lighter underneath, right? As soon as I mix this up, it's going to be whiter underneath. But if you mix this up, I'm kind of at the point now where I feel like most people would not be able to, from a distance, at all clock that this wasn't meat, okay? You could fool anybody. If you told them this was a bowl of taco meat, they would probably believe you at first. When they bite into it, they will know that it's not meat, right? That's obvious. But it's definitely, for me, this is something like, you know, it's a nice, it's pretty decent texture for that replacement. What you can also do, I'm going to show you one last trick here from the other camera. What you can also do with this, so like I said, I eat eggs. I had some leftovers of this from last week. And what I did was I added an egg to it, and then I added an egg to it, and then made it into a meatloaf, and it turned out really, really good. Actually, it held together perfectly. Unfortunately, there are some things that you cannot do without an egg. You could, like, people will ask, can I do that with a chia egg? Like, you can, and it's not gonna be the same. Like, a chia egg does not hold stuff together, unfortunately. The same way an egg does. There are some vegan egg replacers that actually work pretty good. Okay, so I'm gonna do this. So this is my last trick here for getting this off the tray, okay? I'm gonna scrape everything towards the center like we've been doing each time we stirred it. Get it as much towards the center as you can. I have heat-proof fingers, so what I'm about to do might not work for some of you, but this already I can feel has cooled down quite a bit. Don't burn yourself, please, guys, ladies, gentlemen. What you can do, though, is here, if you pick up the four corners, okay, so just kind of scraping, getting the four corners of the parchment paper picked up, okay? This won't work as well with foil as it will with parchment. I'm gonna bring the four corners together, so I'm making kind of like, if you imagine like you've made a little hammock out of parchment paper, okay? So I can just now pick this up and dump all of that very easily into the bowl. Maybe if you just dumped it all over your counter, I apologize. It definitely takes a little bit of practice, but like anytime you've roasted a full pan of stuff, you don't have to stand there for 5 minutes scooping it off. You can pick up parchment. And I believe that that is all that I have for you tonight. So if anyone has any questions, please come over here. Tell me what's going on. I'd like to know how it turned out. We can see. We can unmute everybody and see if there's no.
Oh, here.
Oh, there we go. Okay, I just unmuted everybody. It might be mayhem. You've been unmuted, so just be aware. Just be aware. How did it turn out?
Turned out incredible. Everything, my kids are eating it. Love it.
Amazing.
Awesome.
So who's feeling Indian food? I'm feeling like we need to do an Indian food.
Yes, please.
The next couple of weeks.
Indian food is always good for me.
Well, I grew up in Brampton and I joke that I'm like more Indian than white. Like I just Indian food is my soul food. So
I don't see Brett.
What do I do with the rest of this tofu?
Didn't you use the whole block? There should have been a whole block that went into it.
No, I didn't. Sorry, my mistake.
Oh no, that's okay. You can, I mean, there's lots of stuff you can do with the tofu, James. You can roast it up. You can cube it up into a salad. I like this meat mixture. If you don't put any seasoning into it, you can use this to make pasta sauce. You can use this to make lasagna. You can use it to make like sausage scramble. It depends on the seasoning you put into it, right? So that base really, without those spices, is a really good base for any kind of ground meat replacement.
Mike, what do you do with the sauce? What's the sauce for?
Okay, so the way I would build this right now is I would take a piece of lettuce.
Oh, he's doing.
I would do a wrap. If you're doing a salad, again, the sauce is basically your salad dressing.
Okay.
Right, you would drizzle it over as salad dressing, or it's like a taco sauce. So I'm gonna put here a little bit of guac in the bottom. I don't have any spoons. Put the guac on the bottom if you have the option, because it's going to glue everything together. So you're doing all that stuff, yeah. Any other vegetables you would want chopped up, right? You can have chopped up tomatoes. You can have any other taco.
So good.
Put some fake cheese. So this, build it up and like, what did you say, sorry?
Can I just interrupt for a second and
Yeah, go
get Eva
ahead.
on the camera?
Yeah.
Eva, are you there?
Oh my God, my mom Eva moved to Bermuda and my mom took Eva's cat. And my mom's cat is probably crawling all over her right now. I can find you, Mom, and put you on the spotlight. Where are you? Let me see. Oh yeah, there we
I
go.
just wanted Eva to see Jasper.
There we go. There he is. She's Jasper's original mommy, so. This cat literally like lives on my mother's chest. She can't get a minute of peace without him like crawling up and hugging her face.
I just wanted
He's one of those cats that's got the angry face, but he's like the sweetest. He plays fetch, that cat. It's bizarre. If you've never seen a cat play fetch.